The views expressed on the Nova Society are those of the panelists and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Phoenix Research Institute or any institution which any panel member is associated.
Welcome back to the Nova Society. I'm your host, Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon, and I'm here with my panel, Dr. Scott Gershwer and Dr. Mark Bound. Your favorites, I hope, and mine. And today we will be answering listener emails, and we have a question from Randall, who lives in Butte, Montana. And Randall asks, well, that didn't take long. The peace plan in the misled East seems to be unraveling. Israel is accusing Hamas of not meeting the agreement deal and has resumed bombings. Trump has said that since Hamas has not honored the deal, Israel can do what it wants. I know the panel has expressed these thoughts on what would happen. Oh, I see. I know the panel has expressed these thoughts on what would happen. So now we see this playing out. What future are you guys predicting? So what?
They want to predict. They want a prediction.
Yeah.
Come
On.
You know our record.
Yeah, Randall, you're really brave asking for a prediction.
Oh gosh, that's kind of rough.
From what I
Scott,
understand, Vance is over there leaning on Netanyahu. Is that correct? Yeah, we've got Vance over there leaning on Netanyahu.
Who knows?
That's what I read most recently.
Yeah.
Let's put it this way. A week ago, we were positive and upbeat and happy, right? And we said it's probably not going to last, and it hasn't. So that prediction came true, right?
That's correct.
So we did pretty well there. What is going to happen? What has really changed? What is going on? There's so much we don't know, and such a huge problem with understanding anything that's going on in Gaza and in Israel and the Middle East and the rest of the world, because there's no transparency at all. And the truth is the first casualty of war, and the truth is long dead. So, look, I think the good news is that the Israelis got the hostages back. The less good news, I guess, is that some of the remains of hostages are back, and then some of the other ones that are in areas that they can't reach, that they say they can't reach, or they don't have the military muscle to oust the groups that actually are holding on to them, because it wasn't simply Hamas committing these atrocities against the Israeli people and prisoners, but also other splinter groups and other factions and different Palestinian groups that were involved. And I guess the least good thing is that Hamas has gone out and started murdering people that they don't like, including some of the very people who were released by the Israelis as part of this peace deal. And so I don't know. All the people who said, Hamas, I stand with Hamas. Well, Hamas is now murdering their own people. So how does that make you feel? I'm not gloating, because I think it's disgraceful and horrible and tragic. And I don't think there's anything good happening in Gaza at all.
Yeah.
Trump was saying something about Hamas had to behave, and Hamas, as long as Hamas behaves.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thanks for bringing that up, Brooke, because what his initial reaction was that Hamas was cleaning house, and he was okay with that. And then I guess somebody said to him, Trump, that's not a good look. And so he went back and he said, all right, they better stop doing that, or else we're going to come in there and we're going to disarm them. And that's, I'm not even sure that's better. I think it's actually worse, because now what he's talking about, and I hope he's just talking about it and not thinking it, clearly not thinking it through, is putting U.S. troops in harm's way in Gaza for Gaza. And it makes absolutely no sense. And we know what happens when U.S. troops go into a Middle Eastern country where they become automatic targets of the worst of the worst.
Yeah. And, Scott makes a good point. And I think a lot of cases, when we saw protests on college campuses and stuff that support Palestine, I honestly never saw anybody support Hamas. I did say support Palestinians, and sometimes we take that to mean both the people and Hamas is the political group that we're talking about. So to those people, I suggest, and this is probably why it's taken so much blowback in my mind, because they have not made that distinction. It's okay to support the people of Palestine, the innocent people of Palestine. It's not so much a good idea to support Hamas because that's, well, we see what they are. So, if you're going to continue to do the protests on college campuses, which is perfectly fine, it's within your right to do so, make sure you delineate exactly what it is you're protesting for. And if you're going to protest the way the Israelis are conducting the war against Palestine, and the suffering the Palestinians are going through, then you also have to condemn Hamas for what it is doing to the Palestinians. Oh, and let's remember, Hamas are other Palestinians. So, a little bit of clarity there. We always talk about transparency and clarity. A little clarity there would be very good. I am all for no child. I don't care, Israeli, Palestinian, I don't care, pink with polka dots should be in harm's way. And when you're conducting a war, as Israel is conducting, and I think they have reason to be conducting the war against Hamas, again, the fog of war, you're going to have casualties, innocent casualties. There's no way around it. No matter the military is not a scalpel. I don't know how many times I've said that. It is a sledgehammer. It is not made to be a scalpel. Now, does Israel have a very accomplished scalpel at their disposal? Yes, they do. But Hamas is rather bigger. We're not just talking about 5-10 people here. We're talking about a very large organization. And that scalpel, that's a big cancer to have to, ask Mossad and those other agencies that are so good at taking out people, individuals or small groups of people. That's a lot to ask of them. So you have to send in the big guns. You have to send in the sledgehammer. And unfortunately, it's a reality. We can't just pick and choose. Especially when we're fighting an enemy, and I'm talking about the Israelis here, when you're fighting an enemy that uses its own people as human shields to protect themselves, in the hopes that killing, and this is Hamas, in the hopes that killing those civilians will bring the opinion of the world against you, which, guess what? That's worked pretty well. I hate to say it, it has worked pretty well without thinking that through. Because the fact is they would not have been in that position of danger if not for Hamas in the first place. So, yeah, and this was Monday's episode where we talked about this. And I hate to say it, we got two predictions. We did say that this was not going to last. And it was because we couldn't identify. And I remember what the listener asked. He couldn't identify where we go from here. It wasn't, truly spelled out. And we all basically said, well, this could happen, but you're right, it's not spelled out. But that once the hostages were released, and I think it was across the board with us, once the hostages were released, there's nothing keeping them held back other than the opinion of the world. And at this point in time, Israel really doesn't give a rat's ass what the rest of the world thinks. And when you got Trump saying, well, they acted badly, those people in Palestine. They acted badly. Netanyahu, do your worst. Do what you got to do. And I totally agree with Scott. The last thing the United States needs is another Beirut. Now, I'm not going to say that Trump is smarter than my tabletop here. But I will say this. There are political people within his administration, no matter how bad they may be, they do understand the disaster that having a Beirut under Trump would be. Because let's remember, the disaster of Beirut under Reagan, and he was popular, didn't go very well. So this is not where we want to be.
I want to throw a little.
Here we go.
I don't even know what to call it. But look, the There are cultural differences between us here in the United States and people in the Middle East. And I don't think that we're respecting those cultural differences. And I don't think we're respecting their culture when we start talking the way that our young people have about them. And that it just might be that they believe that whatever it is that Hamas thinks it's doing, or they think Hamas is doing, is worth their dying for, and worth their children dying for. We see now in Syria that there's been, another bit of bloodletting. We saw originally that when the current regime in Syria took over, the al-Shara, I guess we'll call him, regime went after the Assad family sect, right, and murdered hundreds of civilians. And we sort of wrote it off as it's an understandable bloodletting that happens after a war and all the combatants and a regime change and so on and so forth. What we're seeing in Gaza right now is somewhat similar in that Hamas is murdering the people of Gaza who are not sufficiently Gazan enough, or I don't even know how to describe it. They're not Muslim enough. They're not angry at the Israelis enough. They're too passive. Whatever it is, whatever the line of demarcation is that Hamas is using to murder people in the streets, to execute people. And yes, I understand that the Israelis have cultivated groups in Gaza, as you would expect that they would, to have insiders there on the side of Israel, who live and conduct their daily lives, but always have an eye toward, we're going to work with the Israelis and against Hamas. And now they've been sort of outed, I guess, and Hamas is killing them. But again, we look at these people and we go, man, they're allowing themselves and their children to live in buildings that they know are going to be destroyed by the IDF, because they're protecting the terrorists who live underneath them in the tunnels. And it's horrible. It's not their fault. They're being used, but maybe, just maybe, it is what they want. Not on an individual basis, right? They don't want their children being killed, but they are certainly willing to have Palestinian children killed in the abstract for this cause. And it got me to thinking, like, when we don't understand other people's cultures, we risk sort of putting our own morality, our own ethics, our own values in their place, and it denies them their humanity. And I thought, well, you know what do we do here in the States that other people don't understand? And it was very easy to come up with. School shootings, massacres, multiple casualty events that when I was working in Germany, and when one of these massacres happened, and the Germans asked me, how do you guys put up with this? And I was kind of forced to say, well, look, I'm not one of the people that does, at least willingly. I would bend the Second Amendment to the point where I was taking AR-15s away from people, shutting down gun shops that was knowingly selling to gangs, et cetera, a bunch of different measures that would have to be put into place that would all be opposed by the Second Amendment people. So I'm not one of them, but I'm not doing enough to stop it from happening. And I teach here at a school. I'm on a campus right now. And I think that all these kids live in fear all the time, at least on some level of consciousness, that this could happen anywhere in the United States at any time. And we're all just waiting our turn. We put up with that. Where no other country in the world has it, right? No other country in the world suffers the way we do when these things happen, and we go around going hopes and prayers, or thoughts and prayers, or whatever it is, and pay lip service to it without actually doing anything about it. And that's our values, right? Our values, that we value guns over children. They value bombs or terrorists over children. And we're no better than they are. And we've got to stop thinking that we are and start understanding that this is their culture. This is what they believe in. And yes, it's when it happens to them, they're horrified and they're sorrowful and they're screaming, about their lost children. I get that. We do the same thing here. But we don't do anything about it. They don't do anything about it. It's a different thing, but it is incomprehensible to somebody from another culture to understand it, why we would put up with it, and yet we do. I know that's a little tangent there. Has nothing to do with what the next steps are. So far, the Israelis have not moved into Gaza to destroy it. Even though there are no hostages there anymore to prevent them from doing so. And I guess we'll all call that a good thing. I don't know how long that's going to last. But right now it seems that the Gazans are busy killing the Gazans, and the Israelis are willing to step back and say, attack one of us and we'll bomb the shit out of you. And they'll do that. But as long as you're only killing each other, it's all good. Go for it.
No, I'm going to say this, Scott. I think that's a great point. I really do. That we don't take into account that the culture is not our culture, and that it is possible that the Palestinians do support their, Hamas, like we support our guns, supposedly. That we find that to be a worthwhile trade-off. And it is extremely possible. And that may also answer another question: why some of the peace agreements that have been formulated by Western countries, by the Western powers in many ways, are unsuccessful, because we do not take into consideration that there's a difference in culture. We look at these things from a Western standpoint. And, this peace deal that Trump, and actually, if you really look into it, that was created during the Biden administration. Trump just basically put his name onto it. But we'll give him credit for following through with it. If it fails, it may be because we only looked at this from the perspective of Western culture and values. And very rarely do we look at it from the perspective of the culture of those that are involved. And I think that's, we've said this numerous times here on this podcast. Half the problems of the Middle East were because of the British after World War II, just dividing things up. You're just putting arbitrary lines in the sand and saying, okay, that's your place and this is your place, without even considering who was living in those places. Not even considering the divisive cultures and peoples they were putting within these arbitrary borders that they created. And so, in a lot of ways, I think that's a valid point. It is an off tangent, because when we talk about how to go forward, if we don't consider that position of we have to consider their culture, not our view of what reality is, but how they view the world, their worldview, their reality. If we don't consider it, no plan going forward can we possibly create that will be successful. Because people are going to, I always say, run home. They're going to run home to their cultural perspectives, and that's all there is to it. So I honestly think that's an absolutely valid point. And in many ways, it answers what the biggest issue is for us moving forward, and for anything moving forward. We talk about two-state solutions because that's a Western idea. That's a totally Western idea. This is the Middle East, and the cultures may have a different perspective. And I think that's one of the reasons why Israel is in such a difficult position where they're at. Because the Israelis, and I could be wrong, you could disagree with me with this, Scott, is the Israelis have a Western mentality. They do not have a Middle Eastern mentality. How many of their people come from other countries, and that Western mentality follows in? And the fact is that puts them even in a worse place. Here you've got a Western power, basically, a Western thinking power in the middle of the Middle East, and nobody thinks like they do.
Certainly, when we were younger, that was definitely the case, right? And I remember them saying it took them a while to learn about high context cultures, right? Because Westerners tend to be in low context cultures where the context doesn't really drive as much of the meaning of something as the content does. And they had to deal with the fact that the neighborhood that they were in were full of high context cultures where expressing something and the tone of voice that you use and the circumstances around it mean more than the words themselves. What we would call a lie is to them simply an expression of how strongly they feel about something. And forget about the content, because the content doesn't matter as much as the context does. And that was something that the Israelis had to learn. I forget who it was who said, we have to listen to them. We don't have to believe them, but we do have to listen to them. And that was, I think, largely in response to the idea that they will say things, they will say things like a New York City cab driver from Pakistan might scream at you, "I will kill you," that kind of thing. And they don't really mean "I will kill you." But in the Middle East, when somebody says "I will kill you," and you're like a Westerner, you go, "You're going to kill me, I'm going to kill you," and they pull out a gun and start shooting.
Especially if you're in New York City. Yeah, really.
Right. Or if you're attacking Egypt's airplanes while they're still on the ground, and if Egypt says, "We're going to invade your goddamn country, what do you think of that?" The next morning, their air force is in ruins and smoldering on the tarmac because the Israelis took them at their word. And there may not have been a real reason for them to take them on their word, because their culture says that they say things without actually meaning them. And that the context of the situation is more important than the content of it. So try to sort that one out, folks. And good luck. But I don't,
good luck to you.
But to your point, Mark, I don't know if the current Israeli situation is that foreign anymore to the Middle East, because a lot of the most of the people in the government now, I think, are Mizrahi Jews from the Middle East, or they're Sabras who were born in Israel and never knew anything but Israel. So for the David Ben Gurions and the Weissmans, Chaim Weissmans, and the even Moshe Dayans, those people came from Eastern Europe and had a Western mentality. But I'm not sure that the current Israeli crop of politicians has the same thing. Not sure.
Well, you're probably right. Probably not to that level.
So we're talking about culture. I know we're talking about cultural relativism. Are you also talking about ethical relativism? And because
the ethics is cultural, right?
Absolutely.
Extremely cultural.
Right.
So it seems to me that then we here in the West, the United States, we shouldn't be making any peace plan whatsoever, because we've certainly proven ourselves to be woefully inept at understanding any culture. I mean, look at Vietnam, for example.
Yeah.
And
that's the point.
Real point. Yeah. I mean, when we went to Paris to meet with the Vietnamese, the Americans got hotel rooms. The Vietnamese bought a chalet or something like that. They bought a house because they were hunkering down for the long term, and we were there for the short term. Our contingent stayed in hotels, and it took them 2 weeks to decide on what the shape of the table should be like in the conference room where they were negotiating, and the Americans began to say, you know what, maybe we don't need hotel rooms, maybe we need to get our own houses here because we're going to be here for a while. And yeah, that's a huge cultural difference, no doubt.
And it also, if Trump and Kushner and whatnot are thinking, I still keep thinking about this, are thinking about, Club Med or whatever it is, and turning Gaza into hotels or whatnot, given the huge pushback of having and the dangers of having Americans in the area and or certainly the military in Gaza. I mean, I cannot imagine what the Middle Eastern reaction would be to having turning the Palestinian people into servants and having Americans and other wealthy people vacationing all over the place. I think that would be just asking for massive violence that would make Beirut look tiny. I think that is a just an unconscionable idea. I don't know what your thoughts are.
I mean, I agree, and I think that there's great proof of that, because in this, so the next phase of this plan, if we ever get there, would be to have an international stabilization force in Gaza. That's one of the next steps in the next phase of the agreement. It's a 3-phase agreement. We're still in phase 1, but diplomats from a number of countries that have been asked, are you ready to send your troops into Gaza to be the peacekeepers? They're going, we're not there. We're not there yet. You're gonna have to wait on that. And so yeah, we're seeing even, and these are Middle Eastern countries that do understand the context that they're in. But the idea was, if you remember, Antony Blinken's plan was to have Indonesia and the UAE and Egypt and Turkey and Azerbaijan in Gaza to stabilize the countries. And now Trump has, borrowed that idea, and Erdogan has said, we're willing to join the peacekeepers there, but he's not ready to send anybody in. In Indonesia, if you saw, remember the president of Indonesia, Subianto, privately talking to Trump about getting what he wants, and Trump saying, "I'll have my son call you," in a sort of a hot mic moment there, has also said that he's willing to send in 20,000 troops to secure the peace in Gaza, but they're not there. And they're not ready. They're not like, at the airport with their bags packed, ready to go in there, because they know that this is an incredibly volatile and unstable situation that they don't want to put their people in harm's way. And I think rightfully so. So for the time being, the only peacekeepers, such as it is in Gaza, are the Israelis, who are just outside, but still highly capable of killing people and wrecking things from where they are, and nobody else is in there at all. So, yeah.
Sorry, this is where I keep thinking, as you were speaking, Scott, about Trump being on the board of oversight or whatever it's supposed to be, and Trump has no patience for anything. And in the recent meeting with Zelensky, he was apparently yelling and swearing and throwing maps onto the floor, and back to taking Putin's position, of course, which I had anticipated would happen. And I can just see that Trump is not going to want to wait for a genuine peace in Gaza. He's going to want everything instantly and now, and so he can be the great big thing. And
maybe, Brooke, but here's what I think is more likely and already happening. I think is that Trump got the deal. Trump made the deal, right? he stopped, and I believe, and I think that there's good, Axios reported on it at the time. So let's just say that it's probably true that Blinken's plan, the Biden plan, which is the same 20-point plan, I think more or less than that Trump has put forth, failed because Trump wanted it to, because he wanted to make the deal, and now he's made the deal. But here's the thing. After they make the deal, lower level people have to go in and deal with the consequences and the details and how are we going to phase this in and phase that thing. That's not Trump's value system is, I'm the deal maker. I made the deal. Now it's up to you guys to do the rest of it. And he's out. Trump, I don't think you can get Trump to really even think about this. I mean, he sent Vance over. And if there's any sign that it's unimportant, it's that Vance is there and not Kushner and not Witkoff, right? That he's sending Vance over because Vance is not important to Trump. And so I'd say that Trump got his trophy, he got his pelt, and that's all he really cares about. And the rest of it is a bunch of details that other people have to deal with, and it's not going to be him.
Yeah, but isn't he going to want to start breaking ground on his new whatever soon? And things aren't going to be done quickly enough, and he's going to be ready for his next big real estate project, and this isn't going to be ready, and he's going to get angry again.
No, first of all, we got to stop putting Trump into the equation and all this stuff. I mean, Trump, again, like Scott said, he got the deal. He's done. And, everything from there, we can't just say, well, Trump. What the hell are we going to say, 3 years from now when there is no Trump? Oh, we won't have him to blame for everything.
Hallelujah.
Okay. Hallelujah. Absolutely. But the fact is that, we can't keep saying, yeah, but Trump wants us. This isn't about Trump. It really is not. As Scott said, he got his little moment in the sun. He didn't get his Nobel Peace Prize. Too bad, so sad. But the fact is that now, if something's going to be done, it has nothing to do with Trump. It has nothing to do with what Trump wants. The only thing he can do is screw it up more. That's it, such as sending our troops into Gaza. Beyond that, there really isn't a whole heck of a lot. He isn't controlling Netanyahu bombing anybody. He isn't he's not doing that. Netanyahu's going to do what Netanyahu wants to do. And we've seen that. And, we got to take Trump out of that equation. Trump has nothing to do with it now. He is so far removed from it. And I agree with Scott. Senator J.D. Vance shows just how much he's removed from it. And that's it. I mean, that to me, sometimes we attribute way more to Trump than he deserves. And the fact is that, no, I don't care if he wants to build. Hey, what? Go ahead. Start sending in, the local 295 cement mixers into Gaza. Good luck to them. You're not going to do it. So all of that is just, I don't see it. I don't see
But
it.
he inserts himself when he doesn't need to, like into this
Which is what I'm saying to you, Brooke. All he can do is muck it up. That's all he can do. He can't do anything more than that. He isn't going to influence anything in this. This is done. Once the hostages went back, now this is between the Hamas, and it's between Israel and the rest of the Middle East. That's all there is to it. And yeah, he can want all he wants, but he's going to be just like everybody else. He's on the outside looking in now, because all of the leverage he had is gone.
He's been waiting for how long now? At least 10. But probably more like 20 years to get his Moscow Trump hotel, right?
Yep.
I mean, that was the thing that he was hiding from voters in 2016, was that he had a business deal in the works, and had for some time a business deal in the works for a Moscow Trump hotel, or building, or whatever it was going to be, apartments, and that he was willing, to put that aside while he was president. But then he wasn't president for 4 years, and it still didn't happen. Now it's still sort of out there. So he's going to have to wait, I think, before he gets his hotel on, the Mediterranean in Gaza. And I don't think he's got like a real issue with that. He's, the Indonesian guy is giving him a golf course, land for a golf course in Indonesia, and he's got plenty of deals going around the world. He's building a giant ballroom so people can come and pay homage to him and get him to to do what they give him, the contracts that they want. So I think I think he's in a good place right now, and he's not too worried about what next steps in Gaza are.
Alrighty, so thank you, Randall, for your question, and thank you to all our listeners for spending some time with us on the Nova Society. If you are not yet subscribed on the platform of your choice, please do so. Subscribing is free, and we will see you next time on the Nova Society.
The Nova Society is a production of Nova Society Media, a division of the Phoenix Research Institute. We'd like to thank our production partners, Buzzsprout, who hosts the Nova Society, Audacity, our editing partners, Apple iTunes, the largest source of podcasts and music on the internet, Spotify, the most popular platform for the Nova Society, and iHeartRadio, your source for all things music and podcasting. The Nova Society is available on all of these and other quality platforms listed in our description. We'd also like to thank all of our listeners. Without your support, the Nova Society would not be possible. If you have a question or comment, we can be reached at nova.society.podcast@gmail.com. So for Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon, Dr. Scott Gershwer, and all of our production partners here at the Nova Society, I'm Dr. Mark Bound. Remember, the true power in society is knowledge. Thanks for listening, and we will see you again next time. We'd like to thank our sponsor for this episode, the Journal of Interdisciplinary Conflict Science. The JCIS is an open journal for upcoming scholars. The JCIS is currently accepting article submissions on an ongoing basis. The JCIS is a publication of NovaWorks, a scholarly depository at Nova Southeastern University. A link to the journal is in our description.